Endurance Junkie Podcast, episode 105, brought to you by Health IQ, an insurance company that helps health-conscious people get special life insurance rates. Go to healthiq.com/junkie to support the show and learn more. Hey Junkies, what's up? My name is Peter, and thanks for joining me on a new episode of the Endurance Junkie Podcast, the show where I will be interviewing some of the fastest, smartest, and most inspiring people active in the endurance world today. Now before we get going, I would quickly like to thank Health IQ for supporting. Now many people in the endurance community have had trouble with how much they pay for their life insurance. And despite their own health-conscious lifestyle, they might get penalized for family history and BMI and stuff like that. Well, Health IQ is a company that has decided to change all that. And they use science and data to secure lower rates on life insurance for endurance junkies. A bit like saving money on your car insurance for being a good driver, Health IQ saves you money on your life insurance for living a healthy lifestyle. To see if you qualify and get a free quote today, just go to healthiq.com/junkie. That's healthiq.com/junkie, and maybe save over $1,000 on your yearly premium. Steve Magness is a runner, author, lecturer, and a performance coach to some of the top distance runners in the world. Known widely for his integration of science and practice, Steve has been on the forefront of innovation in sport. In his second book, Peak Performance, Steve provides useful advice for people who want to improve their performance in all aspects of life. So hi Steve, thanks for coming on the show. Now, for those of us who don't know you, can you maybe start off by telling us a bit about yourself and your own sporting background growing up and how you got into coaching?
Oh man, that's a long story, but to keep it short, I think I ended up in coaching based on my own failures as an athlete, right? So I was a really good youth runner all the way up into, the junior ranks, 18, 19 years old. When I was 18, I ran a mile in 4 minutes and 1 second and a 1500 in 3:43, which was the top time for a junior in the U.S. that year. So it was really good, and I trained really hard to do it. I mean, as a 17, 18-year-old kid, I was running up to 100 miles a week. Mm-hmm. So a lot of training to do it, and it worked well for a short period of time. And then once I, got into the senior ranks, 19, 20, 21, into college, university system, I just didn't progress. And my lack of progress really is what began my interest in coaching, right? It almost started from a selfish reason because I wanted to know, why am I not getting better? And that kind of transferred into coaching because it was really fascinating and interesting because, I did a deep dive on the history of training and then the physiology and science, and was studying it at university in kinesiology and exercise science at the same time. So I was really getting for a feel for not only the research and the theory, but also how it impacted me out in the real world. And my start to coaching came with coaching junior athletes, so coaching high school athletes when I got started. And really it was about not making the same mistakes that I did as an athlete. And there was something of value that I found in making sure to guide those young runners maybe in ways that I didn't have guidance. Mm-hmm. So, and there was just something about coaching, right? When I was done competing as a runner, I needed to find something that gave me that passion and that joy and that excitement you have when you're running a really good race or setting a PR. Mm-hmm. And I found that joy and excitement through, helping other people to do that. So that's kind of been my quest since then, is how to get better at this act of coaching, and then also how to pass that down to others and make sure that they don't make as many mistakes as I did along the way.
Yeah. So all the training that you did that ended up running for a 1 mile and stuff like that, that was all the training that you did by yourself, and you weren't coached at the time, or?
So yeah, I was coached. I had a really good high school coach who I learned a lot from. He came from the sprint background, and like actually when I started, or my sophomore year in high school was the first time he coached distance athletes. So it was really good from a coaching learning experience of like we were kind of learning the ropes at the same time, which was great. But like I also had free reins on like how much I was going to run and stuff like that. So that was like kind of my decision of like, oh, I want to get better. Like I'm going to run more. And like during that period in the US, like there was a big revival of people doing a lot of big volume, right? We had some other really fast high school runners, like Don Sage, who ran for Joe Newton, who's a famed high school coach, who were running a lot of volume. So like that was the thing to do. So like you looked around and you said, hey, like I want to be good. Like let's go all in on it. So motivation wasn't a problem. So I just kind of, went all in.
Yeah. And so looking back at it, you just burned out too quickly. Is that basically it?
Yeah. It's a thing where, and that's probably the lesson that I've learned the most here is that now working with several elite athletes is the better you get, it's not the more you need to push, right? Because elite athletes are really motivated, right? They're going to want to press that boundary as hard as they can. So your job as a coach essentially is not to motivate them. It's not to push them forward. Yeah, it's holding them back. Yeah. So, my own failure was probably like, I probably needed someone to hold me back a little bit to, lengthen out that period of growth instead of like jamming it all into like, a short period of time.
Yeah. So, and that holding back, is that sort of like the basis of your current coaching philosophy?
Yeah, it really is. I kind of look at it in a sense of like, athletes are really talented and like it's my job almost not to screw them up a little bit. So like I need to prevent them from doing dumb things, right? It's not that I'm not a coach that is like hyper controlling in the sense of like we need to do A, B, and C and this is the way. I more see coaching as like a partnership where I'm trying to teach and make that athlete grow. And part of that is like making sure they don't push too hard or don't make mistakes. So a big part of my coaching philosophy is to, pass down that information. And then I think the other part of it is probably like recognizing the individual, right? Is, the longer I've been in this business, the more I've seen it. It's not, hey, what does it take to run a 15-minute 5K? It's, what does the person sitting directly in front of me need to achieve like those goals? Because they can get there any myriad of ways. Like there's no one magical training program. So it's like my job to figure out, all right, what does this athlete in front of me need? Yeah.
And it goes beyond just running. You take in nutrition and rest and all that stuff as well?
Oh, of course. I think the other part of it is like, in coaches' education, like sometimes we obsess over the programming, right? The training workout designs, because that's what our background is. And that's like where the fun stuff is. But that's a small portion of it, right? If you look at nutrition, if you look at recovery, if you look at like motivation, psychology, like all these different things, like they all matter. And I think as coaches, like we need to do a better job of recognizing that we're coaching people, right? And not like just like writing training programs for robots, right?
Yeah.
So like recognizing that human component is incredibly important.
Talking about nutrition, there's a lot of things going on now. You've got your keto, your low calorie, your low carb, high fat diets, your plant-based athletes and stuff like that. Do you have like a specific idea about that, or is it again looking at the individual and seeing what that individual needs and works best for him or her?
I think you hit the nail on the head there where it's the individual. I think if we look at diet, I think one of the biggest problems and why things don't catch on is because like the diet guru almost gives like it's a one size fit all, right? And that's not the case. Like some people are gonna run really well on a plant-based diet. What some people are gonna run really well, like the East African Kenyan runners are in an incredibly high carbohydrate sugar diet, which for health reasons probably doesn't make a whole ton of sense, but like from a performance reason, like great. Like that's what they're accustomed to and that's what seems to be working. So I think like if you look at our own physiology and our biochemistry, like there's a lot of individual differences that we need to take into account. And that's why I'm not a huge fan of the one size fit all. I think the other component that you also have to look at on the dietary side is like what's the almost psychological emotional component, right? So if I take an athlete and say, hey, this is the best diet in the world and you need to eliminate A, B, and C and D, and like now their diet, instead of something that like brings recovery and brings like joy of eating, now it's like this dread of like, oh man, I got to plan all this stuff and like I can only eat these meals and I can't go out with my friends here. Like now, like my diet might be better, but I've just hampered this like social component or this enjoyment component to it. So like my recovery actually might not be as good because we know that like, enjoyment and especially social factors can enhance recovery. So it's really striking that balance of like, really finding like what is the best nutritionally for you, and also not making it where it becomes a job, right?
Yeah, because there's so much things that are being monitored these days, heart rate variability and all that stuff. How far can you take all that?
Exactly, and that's the part of the thing is like as a scientist, I love all the stuff we can monitor and measure, and it's cool to see, but it can also like for type A, like obsessive compulsives, which is what a lot of endurance athletes are. It can also drive you a little nuts, right? Because you become obsessed, like, oh, this might make my HRV score go down a little bit, so like I should like not do this, and it takes you into this like minutia when maybe you need to branch out and see the big picture.
Okay, definitely makes sense. You coach, elite athletes mainly, ranging from distances from 800 meters to the marathon. Do you have your own personal preference distance there, and why?
Yeah, I love the 5K. I love the 5K. And the simple reason probably is because it like combines like some speed component, but it's like highly aerobic. So you get to like mix those two together pretty well. And it doesn't have like as many hazards as like the marathon comes out, because like the marathon's like, although there's like good theory, good science, etc., like you show up on the line and you don't know like they can be incredibly prepared, but like the marathon can still win the battle, right? Even if they're top shape. And then in the like really low middle distance, the 800, for example, like fitness can be on point, all that stuff, but it's such a quick race that like tactics and positioning and like execution matter so much that it's a little bit of the roll of the dice. So I feel like the 5K and to a degree the 10K is like those middle of the road distances where I have probably more control on outcome, I think, and like better able to predict like what someone is gonna run. So I guess as a coach, selfishly, like that makes it a little bit more enjoyable to coach because like when someone's ready to go versus the other events.
Yeah, and a 5K and 10K, you can race them almost every week. A marathon, it's like a 1 or 2 a season, and you're done.
Exactly, and that brings the pressure. I always say like the hardest event to watch for a coach is a marathon, because like you're sitting there watching your athlete or tracking them online, and like you won't know if it's a good day or a bad day until 2 2 hours into the dang event, because most people can make it, to 3/4 of the way on pace without showing too many signs of fatigue. So, it's crazy.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to know about your thoughts about the limits of human athletic performance. We've got a 9.58 at the 100 meters by Usain Bolt. We've got a 2 hour and 25-second marathon by Eliud Kipchoge at the Breaking 2 project. Which records do you think are going to stand for a while now, and which ones are going to be broken in the near future?
Oh man, that's a good question. Both are extremely out there. On one sense, I think the marathon has more room for improvement, just because there's more things that can go wrong, right? There's more limiting factors that we can kind of check off and improve upon. But what makes it really tough is that 2 hours and 25 was like run in these like idealized conditions, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know when those are going to happen again, right? Because it depends on, some shoe company or some company like setting that up again, and whether they will or not, who knows? So it's tough. I think if we were just looking at like the marathon record run in, big city marathons, I think that has way more room for improvement than Bolt. So I think what makes Bolt so crazy and special is that it's such an outlier, and he himself was such an outlier, because you have this, 6'5" guy who still can accelerate and still can put force into the ground like his shorter competitors. So it's tough. Both records will be broken. Mm-hmm. I think if you look at the limits of human performance, a lot of good, experts, researchers, et cetera, have been made to look dumb when they try and put a number on like what's the limit of performance. And I don't think we're anywhere near it, because I think, if you look at it, a large part of it is like that mental, psychological of like knowing that it can be done. And then like once you can conceptualize it and know it, then like someone else is going to raise that bar.
Yeah. What about the middle distances, like the 1500 or the 5K? You think there's a lot of improvement there as well?
Yeah, I do. I think there's improvement at every level. I think we're a long ways off from like what our max capacity is. It's interesting because like if you compare it to horse racing, right? Mm-hmm. So horses have, if you look at the Kentucky Derby and stuff like that, like the major horse races, like they've been stagnant speed-wise since like the 1960s, right? But humans are different, because like horses don't know like what records are. They don't know, they have no thing. So like with us, like when you see someone just a little bit ahead, like it pushes to that next boundary. And I think in every event, you're going to see that go. I think the one that will probably reach the limit first will probably be the 100, because it's like we're going to get to a point where it's like mechanically driven, since it's such a mechanical and power event. Where in the distance events, like even the middle distance, like there's so much of like a mental component of like being able to push that pain barrier that you'll see probably progress continuing there for longer.
Okay, well, thanks for that. Going back to coaching, there are so many coaches out there online and both in real life, and we're all flooded on social media with all these training advice articles and stuff like that. So what would your advice be for an athlete who's looking for a coach? What do they need to look out for?
Yeah, I would say is look out for the ones that give you like the answer and say like, hey, my way is the way to run faster, because that doesn't exist, right? You want a coach who is like an explorer and trying to like find your potential with you. So it's like look for those things. Other things I would look for is like, ask about their athlete improvement and injury rates, right? Because those are what matter. It's not like the one-off, like, oh, I coached this person to, the Olympic Games or World Championship competitor or whatever. Like, it, as someone who works in those circles, like, there's some athletes who are so talented that like, my dog could coach them to that if they would. Like that's the reality. So like dig deep and ask, hey, what are your athletes' improvements like? Like what's the injury history? Do people, stay healthy and happy and all that stuff? Versus just looking at, the one-off accolades.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for that. Good advice as well. We all can run. We've all learned that in school. But if you want to run fast, we have to have proper technique, I guess. So what are some of the most common mistakes that you see in amateur runners and triathletes and stuff like that? And how can they best go about to fix those?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's another hotbed question, is this running form thing, because there's a lot of theories out there. What I would say is the kind of things you look out for, or I look out for at the basic level, are almost like smoothness and efficiency, right? If you watch someone who's really good at running, like whether they're running really hard or really slow, like it looks pretty dang smooth. Like there's a rhythm to it, right? If you watch someone who's kind of recreational and not, like they look like they're kind of out of sync. Like their arms might be moving like in one direction and their legs like might be moving in the other, and you get like crossing of the arms and stuff like that. Like it doesn't have that rhythm, right? And like what I would suggest is always a basic line is like watch some really good runners run, see that rhythm, and then like see what you're doing differently, right? Because it's almost a feeling. As far as actual specifics, I think the biggest thing that that recreational or amateur runners mess up is probably landing like way out in front of their knee when they run. So you see them stretch out and try and reach for the ground to get like good stride length, instead of getting good stride length from like pushing and applying force to the ground. So that would be the number one thing I'd work on at first, is like, to run faster, you apply more force to the ground. Yeah. So like work on doing that versus like trying to reach out and get more stride length and supposed speed from that.
So just try not to land on your heel, but on your midfoot, and then push off as quickly as you can.
Yeah, so what I would look at it is like, I'm not super concerned on heel versus midfoot, but what I look at it is like, where is your foot landing when when your foot lands, like where is it in relation to your knee, right? Okay. So is it like underneath your knee, or is it like way out extended in front? Because what happens is like when you land, you want to be in position to start pushing relatively soon, right? And if I have to wait for my like body and center of mass to come under my foot because I reached out so far ahead, then I'm like killing time, wasting time in order, for me to apply force. So if we can get our foot where it lands and then, absorbs the force and then is a position to push really quickly, then you're in a better spot for being more efficient and covering more ground.
Yeah, okay. Well, if people want to look more into detail into that, I guess they can always go to your website and probably find more information there.
Yep, definitely. You can check out my website, scienceofrunning.com, and I got all sorts of articles and videos and all that good stuff.
Yeah, okay. I'll put the link up on the show notes page. Talking about science of running and stuff like that. You've also written a couple of books, and you've also released a new one recently called Peak Performance that you co-wrote with Brad Stolberg, I guess, from Outside Magazine. Can you tell us a bit about that? Why did you write it? What's it about? And most importantly, why should we all go out and get a copy?
So it's a little departure from my straight coaching work, in the sense that I wrote it, or rewrote it, because we saw all these like commonalities between like really good athletes that I was working with, and then Brad, like really good athletes, and he comes from the business world a little bit more, like consultants and executives, and like we started with this idea that like regardless of your domain, like performance is performance, and that's what we saw like when we explored. So we talked to a world-class drummer who was taking us through his like pre-routine before he was about to go on stage with like 60,000 people at a stadium, and he's sitting there telling us like, I go and I do some light like cardio to get my heart rate up, and then I do some like dynamic like flexibility stuff and like some arm swings and stuff to get some range of motion. And then he's like, then I go start drumming, and like the entire thing, like he's walking us through his routine, there's no drumming. And he's sitting there like, oh no, like I'm trying to warm up my body and then like get my mind in the right space, because I'm going to perform. And we're sitting there like, well, that sounds like the warm up I do as an athlete to get ready for a race, So there's all these commonalities between, domains, whether it's like, as I said, musicians or like business workers or researchers or mathematicians or writers. And what we tried to do is like see like, okay, like what can we learn from each, right? Can I as a runner take anything away from, some mathematician who's figured out some groundbreaking theory? And I think like the conclusion we came was, yeah, there were lots of things to come away with it. So we tried to outline like what those things were. So, if that sounds interesting to you, then check out the book. I think it's valuable, and I think it's, as a coach, it's the longer I've been doing this, the more I've learned the value of learning and reaching outside of my domain for learning, because like all those lessons that I can take from someone who's thought about a similar topic, but in a different way, like I can bring that back into the running world, and like it brings me more insight than sometimes I think, just going around and reading a book on training, which I've done 1,000 times.
No. So, I mean, the people who buy the book or read the book, they can also apply these things to other aspects of their life?
Exactly.
Okay. I will put the links up as well. It's, I guess, available at all the normal retailers.
Yep, all the normal spots.
All right, cool stuff. Looking back at your own running career and your coaching career and stuff like that, what do you see as your biggest achievement in your career so far, and what's your biggest regret or disappointment that you had to deal with?
Oh man, that's a tough one. It's tempting to like, when you hear achievement, it's tempting to just say like, oh, I coached this athlete to do this thing. Mm-hmm. But I think for me, like if I look at like the joy I've gotten out of things, it's probably like the few occasions where I've seen an athlete accomplish something that they didn't think was possible, right, for themselves. And it could be making a world championship team, or it could just be running, someone who's, an average college runner running, 30, 40 seconds faster than they ever thought was possible. And like seeing those breakthroughs as a coach are probably my most valuable times, because like you got to show someone or help guide them to something that they didn't see as possible. Mm. So that would be my greatest achievement, I think. Yeah.
Regrets or disappointments that you had to deal with?
Oh man, those, like the ones that sting are the big championships, the athletes who finish like, just out of making a world championship team or Olympic team. And I know on achievements I said not to talk about those, but like you just feel bad as a coach, because you're like, you rack your brain and you say, oh man, we got 4th or 5th and top 3 made the team. Like, was there something that I didn't do? Like, is this my fault for not letting this athlete achieve this thing that they've dreamed about for, since they were a kid, and a lot of times. So like sometimes you go back and you're like, yeah, if we would have done this, maybe the outcome would have been different, and you can drive yourself nuts. But like, those are probably the disappointments that sting the worst for me.
And how do athletes react then with such disappointments? Yeah, in the relationship towards you as a coach then.
Yeah, it's tough. That's a really good question, because like the thing is, you're both invested, right? So you go to Olympic trials in the U.S. and your top 3 make the team and you fall a little short. Like, there's nothing but disappointment, right? But as a coach, like I feel like it's my job to try and bring some sort of awareness, right, and some sort of like perspective to it all, because like the worst thing I can do is sit there and like blame the athlete or like, you know, throw a pity party and get down on them. Like that's not helping them grow or learn as an athlete. So like I've got to try and get out of that, you know, that spot and like bring some sort of perspective and like help them get through that.
Yeah. Okay. Can be tough, I can imagine.
Yeah.
What's the greatest piece of advice that you've received yourself in the sport of running?
Oh man. I think the biggest one that I've, as a coach and as an athlete, is like having patience and trusting the process. Because like when you're really competitive, right, you want like those results, those outcomes like now, and you really want to see like, all right, like, you know, I can do this right away. I can, you know, make the next step. And like, it's tempting to almost get greedy and like, you know, skip steps on like your development or, you know, like go all in on like training really hard or like throwing a lot of work at an athlete just to try and like bring them to that next level. And what invariably happens when you get greedy is like the performance eventually backfires. Like you rob Peter to pay Paul. So like really having that like self-awareness to like step back and like have some perspective and just like trust the training and the process that you've set up to get them better.
Yeah, that's an answer I get a lot on to trust the process. So I think it must be definitely spot on. All right, thanks so much for your time, Steve. This and for your wisdom. This has been really fun. How can people get in touch with you if they want to?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter at Steve Magness. Check out my blog or my website at scienceofrunning.com, and you know, I have all sorts of other social media, so just wander around and you'll see it.
Yeah, okay. I'll put those links up on the show notes pages as well. Have you got some partners or something that you work with that you can plug now?
Yeah, so I mean, check out my book, Peak Performance, coach at University of Houston. That's about it. So.
Yeah, okay. Nothing else you want to plug?
No, that works.
All right, cool. Well, one final question to finish it off. If you could sit on a bench at a nice park and chat for an hour with somebody from the past or the present, who would it be?
Oh man, that's a tough one. You know, my mind is going a million different places, but as a runner and as an athlete, like I think I would want to sit down and chat with Percy Cerutty, who's a famed Australian distance coach in the 60s and 70s, who coached Herb Elliott to a gold medal and world record at the Olympics in I think 64 or something like that. And the reason is because like he's known as like this crazy eccentric guy who had some out there thoughts, but he got fantastic results from his athlete, and I just think he'd be like fun to sit there and chat about and get some ideas from.
Yeah. With all the research that has been done in training and all that sort of physiology, do you think it's still possible to be a coach with, you know, out of the box ideas and train athletes like that?
Yeah, you know, I don't know if it's still entirely possible to be like only that way and get the results, but I think like I think that like we still need a component of that, right? Because that's how like breakthroughs happen. Like, you know, breakthroughs generally don't happen from like years and years of research. It's like someone thinking just slightly outside the box and applying this. And then we come back on the research side and like validate and say, oh, this is why it works. So because like that's how innovation works. So I think it's good to like, and that's why I know my strength and my mindset is always in the science and research world. So I try and keep enough on the other side to like remind me of that like artistic outside the box, almost crazy side, to make sure that, you know, I have a little aspect of that in my coaching.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Well, hopefully, some nice idea can pop into your head soon, and we can see some nice performances from your athletes.
Well, sounds good.
Well, thanks so much for your time, Steve. Much appreciated.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
All right, Junkies. Thanks for listening to this episode with Steve Magness. Now, if you like these little interviews and don't want to miss any future episodes, just head over to iTunes or Stitcher and simply subscribe to the show. You will find the necessary links on the website, junkiepodcast.com. I would also like to thank everyone who has left a rating and a review there. It's much appreciated. And if you haven't done so yet, please consider leaving me one and help me grow the show. We're also available on Spotify, so you can search for Endurance Junkie Podcast in the search bar, and you will find me no problem. And if you have suggestions for possible future guests, just shoot me an email at peter@junkiepodcast.com. That's peter@junkiepodcast.com, and I'll try to make it happen. And thanks again for listening, and I hope you'll join me next time. Cheers, guys.